In a junkyard, hidden beneath rust and dust, an old Jeep sat forgotten. At first, it looked like nothing more than scrap metal, until a hidden box inside revealed a story no one in town had ever heard. And that day, in the quiet corner of a small town, a man who had carried silence for decades finally spoke. Because that Jeep wasn't just a machine, it was the witness to a brotherhood that refused to fade. Welcome to The Last Stand, where we tell the stories of forgotten courage, quiet sacrifice, and the unshakable bonds that never truly fade. Today, we follow the story of a Jeep thought to be scrap metal until it revealed the voice of a man who had carried its memories for a lifetime. On the edge of town, where rusted tractors and wrecked trucks lay buried under weeds, a group of kids wandered through the junkyard on a hot summer afternoon. They weren't looking for anything special, just a little adventure. That's when one of them stopped. Half buried in dirt and leaves, a Jeep sat leaning to one side. Its paint had long since faded. The doors were coated with rust, and the windshield was cracked straight across the middle. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a piece of forgotten scrap. "Check this out," one of the boys said, brushing his hand over the hood. "Looks like something out of an old war movie." Another laughed. "Man, this thing's been here forever. Nobody's touched it in years. But look, those headlights. They still look solid." Curiosity got the better of them. They pulled the weeds away, trying to see more. As the dust cleared, something unusual caught their eye. A small metal plate mounted behind the steering wheel. The numbers etched into it didn't look like any ordinary registration tag. And in the back, tucked between torn seats, sat a rusty first aid kit, still intact. "This isn't just any old Jeep," whispered one of the boys. By evening, the kids were telling their friends what they'd found. Within days, more people drifted into the junkyard to take a look for themselves. Most thought it was nothing more than a relic, but a few noticed the same odd details: the plate, the kit, the way the frame seemed built tougher than usual. Joe, the town's mechanic, crouched down beside the open hood and shook his head slowly. "This isn't standard," he muttered. "Look here, that extra reservoir. You won't find that on civilian Jeeps. Someone modified this for field use. This thing's been somewhere it wasn't supposed to be." The crowd grew quiet. The Jeep was no longer just scrap metal. Work on the Jeep began slowly. Joe, the mechanic, along with a couple of eager kids, started by unbolting the rusted seats. It wasn't easy. The screws had long fused with the frame. With every twist of the wrench, flakes of rust fell like powder. Then, as one of the boys yanked at the backrest, he froze. Joe? There's something down here." They all leaned in. Wedged deep beneath the seat frame was a small, dust-caked metal box. Its edges were corroded, but the shape was still solid. Joe carefully pried it loose and set it on the hood. The box rattled when he moved it. Everyone fell silent. The lock had long since snapped. Joe grabbed a pair of pliers, twisted, and the lid popped open with a screech. Inside lay 3 items. 1. A folded map lines drawn in red pencil traced a route through the nearby mountains. At the edge, scrawled words read, "Extraction point, midnight." 2. A faded photograph. A group of soldiers posed proudly in front of the very same Jeep. One man held a pair of binoculars, his expression sharp, confident. 3. A crumpled message slip written in hurried, shaky script. "Situation critical. Convoy pinned down. Unexpected contact. Fallback route." The note ended abruptly, the final words cut short. The kids exchanged nervous glances. "What does that mean? Unexpected contact? Was it an ambush?" Joe studied the slip for a long moment, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just some junk. That's a field communication note." Whoever wrote this didn't have time to finish. The map, the photograph, the note together, they painted a picture of something far bigger than a rusty vehicle. By the next day, word had spread. Folks in the diner whispered about the box found inside the Jeep. Some thought it belonged to a training exercise. Others insisted it had to be from a real mission. But no matter what theory they clung to, everyone kept circling back to the same mystery. Who had driven that Jeep, and what happened on that unfinished night? For the first time, the forgotten vehicle wasn't just a relic of metal and bolts. It was the silent witness to a story cut short, and the town could feel it. The whispers about the Jeep grew louder each day. People debated in the diner, on the sidewalks, even at church after Sunday service. But no one had answers, only questions. That changed one quiet evening. Joe and a handful of kids were wiping down the Jeep's frame when the sound of slow, steady footsteps echoed through the junkyard. Everyone turned. An older man approached, tall even in his age, hair gone gray, beard trimmed but rugged, leaning on a cane. His presence carried a weight that silenced the chatter. Joe recognized him immediately. "Mr. Carter," he muttered under his breath. Carter stopped in front of the Jeep. His eyes scanned the rusted body, the faint outline of unit markings, and then the photograph resting on the hood. He reached out, placing his hand gently on the cold metal. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "This Jeep, it was my team's." The words hit like a stone in still water. The kids froze. Joe straightened. No one dared interrupt. Carter picked up the faded photograph with trembling hands. His thumb brushed over the faces. He tapped one of the young men standing by the Jeep, binoculars in hand. "That's me," he whispered. "And those beside me, my brothers. We rode into the mountains together." Most never came back. One of the boys, wide-eyed, asked softly, "What happened that night?" Carter exhaled slowly, as if carrying the weight of decades. "It was 1972, he began. "Midnight. Our orders were clear. Move through those mountains and pull out a convoy that had been pinned down. The map you found? That was our route. And the note." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Unexpected contact means exactly what you think. An ambush. Gunfire from the ridge. The convoy jammed. Men scrambling for cover. We had seconds to act." His hand tightened around the photograph. "We used this Jeep for cover. Its engine roared when everything else was chaos. It carried us out when we thought we'd never see daylight again." The kids leaned in, captivated. The junkyard, once filled with the smell of oil and rust, now carried the heavy air of history. One teenager finally blurted out, Did you feel guilty for surviving?" Carter shook his head firmly. "No, son. We did our duty. Guilt isn't the weight I carry. It's memory. I remember their laughter, their plans for when they got home, the promises we made in whispers. That's what haunts me. Not guilt, but the silence left behind." He looked around at the young faces. "This Jeep isn't just steel and bolts. It's their voices. Every dent, every scratch carries them back to me." Joe stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, we've been fixing it up. We thought maybe, for you." Carter's eyes softened. "Not for me, Joe. For them. Every man who didn't come back. You restore this Jeep. You honor them. Not me." A hush fell over the group. One of the kids swallowed hard, then spoke with conviction. "We're proud of you, Mr. Carter. Of all of you." Carter gave a faint smile. "Don't be proud of me alone. Be proud of anyone who does their duty, quietly, without applause. This country rests on their shoulders, not the loud ones." The words hung in the air, heavy yet steady. For the first time, the mystery of the Jeep had a voice, and it belonged to a man who had carried it silently for decades. Weeks of work had gone into the old Jeep. Rust had been scraped away, bolts replaced, and the engine coaxed back to life. Every greasy handprint on its frame felt like a small promise to finish what had begun decades ago. On a cool Saturday afternoon, the town gathered in the square. The Jeep sat in the center, its body still weathered but whole again. And in the driver's seat, cane resting by the door, sat Mr. Carter. Joe handed him the key. "She's ready." Carter took it, his fingers trembling. For a moment, he just stared at the ignition, as though uncertain whether to wake the past. Then, with a steady breath, he turned it. The engine coughed, rattled, then roared alive. A deep rumble filled the square, echoing off the buildings. People fell silent, listening. To them, it was the sound of a machine. To Carter, it was the sound of a heartbeat, one he hadn't heard since that midnight long ago. His lips curved into a faint smile. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the sound that carried us home." From the edge of the crowd, a young man stepped forward. He straightened, pressed his hand to his brow, and gave Carter a crisp salute. Then another followed, and another. until nearly the whole square stood, hands raised in silent respect. Carter looked around, overwhelmed. "You don't need to do this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Joe shook his head. "Yes, we do, because this isn't just a Jeep. It's a monument, and you, Mr. Carter, are the man who carried its story for all of us." Carter swallowed hard. "Thank you. But remember, the honor belongs to those who didn't make it back. I'm only here because of them." From then on, the Jeep wasn't hidden in a garage. Once a month, it was rolled into the square, its engine fired up. Children would gather, listening to Joe retell the story. Teenagers would trace the faded numbers on its frame. And Carter, cane in hand, would stand nearby, quiet, proud, and no longer alone with his memories. The Jeep had become more than steel. It was a bridge between the past and the present, carrying the voices of the fallen through the streets of the town. That evening, as the square emptied and the engine finally went quiet, Carter remained in the driver's seat a moment longer. He placed a hand on the steering wheel and whispered, almost to himself, "This honor, it's not mine. It belongs to the brothers who never came home. But today, you let me speak for them." Then he climbed out, cane tapping against the cobblestones, leaving behind a Jeep that would never again be mistaken for scrap metal.